What God has for you, no man can take it away. It doesn't matter what obstacles stand in your path, what people say, or how difficult your situation looks right now. When God has a plan for your life, nothing and no one can stop it. Isaiah 14 verse 27 says, "For the Lord Almighty has purposed, and who can thwart him? His hand is stretched out, and who can turn it back?" Think about that for a moment. The Creator of the universe has a plan for you, and there's no power on earth that can stop what He's ordained for your life. But here's the problem. We often doubt it. When things get tough, we start to wonder if God's promises are really for us, or if maybe we're being overlooked. Maybe you've been there. You've prayed, you've waited, and yet things don't seem to be moving in your favor. You feel stuck, or maybe it seems like doors are being slammed in your face. It's easy to start doubting whether God's plan for you is still in motion. But here's the truth. God's timing is perfect, and His promises never fail. Just because you haven't seen the breakthrough yet doesn't mean it's not coming. Romans 8 verse 31 reminds us, if God is for us, who can be against us? God is still working behind the scenes, orchestrating events in your life, even when you don't see it. In this video, we're going to dive deep into why no one can stop what God has planned for your life. This is a promise straight from God's Word. Whether you're facing opposition, delays, or doubt, the truth is that what God has for you is unstoppable. Lesson number 1. God's plan is greater than your obstacles. One of the main reasons we lose hope is that we become fixated on the challenges directly in front of us. Maybe you're struggling financially, dealing with a broken relationship, or watching a dream you've held for years start to fade away. In those moments, it's easy to feel like the obstacles are too big to overcome. But here's the truth. God's plan is greater than your circumstances. No matter how difficult things seem, Jeremiah 29 verse 11 reminds us of this. "For I know the plans I have for you, declares the Lord, plans to prosper you and not to harm you, plans to give you hope and a future." Even when the situation looks impossible, God's purpose for your life is always bigger than any challenge you face. C.S. Lewis captured this idea perfectly when he said, "Hardships often prepare ordinary people for an extraordinary destiny." The very thing you see as a setback may actually be the setup for something much greater. Take the story of Joseph in the Bible, for example. He faced betrayal, slavery, false accusations, and imprisonment. From the outside, it looked like everything was working against him. But every one of those obstacles was positioning him for his destiny. God was using those hardships to mold and prepare Joseph for the purpose He had in mind. The same is true for you. What may feel like a roadblock today could be the very thing God uses to bring about the breakthrough you've been praying for. No matter how overwhelming your current circumstances might seem, never forget that God's plan for your life is unstoppable. What appears to be a dead end is simply a new direction in God's eyes. He can and will use every hardship, every challenge, and every obstacle to bring you closer to the purpose He has for you. The Bible is filled with stories of people who faced impossible situations, only to watch God turn them around for good. Remember, the obstacles aren't there to defeat you. They're there to strengthen you, grow your faith, and prepare you for the extraordinary destiny that God has in store. So, instead of focusing on the size of your problems, focus on the greatness of God's plan. Lesson number 2. God's timing is perfect, even when it feels delayed. One of the most challenging truths to accept is that God's timing doesn't always align with our own. We live in a world where we expect instant results, and when things don't happen right away, it's easy to become frustrated or discouraged. But Habakkuk 2 verse 3 reminds us, "For the vision is yet for an appointed time, but at the end it will speak, and it will not lie. Though it tarries, wait for it, because it will surely come, it will not tarry." This verse speaks to the reality that God's plans unfold in His perfect timing, not ours. Even when it feels like nothing is happening, God is aligning everything according to His purpose. The delays we experience are not denials. They are divine preparations. C.S. Lewis once said, "I am sure that God keeps no one waiting unless he sees that it is good for him to wait." Waiting is not a sign that God has forgotten you. In fact, the waiting period is often where God does his greatest work in us. It's in the waiting that our character is developed, our faith is stretched, and our dependence on God deepens. While we may see waiting as a frustrating delay, God sees it as a season of preparation. He's shaping you for what's ahead and making sure that when the time comes, you're ready to step into the fullness of his plan. When you're waiting, trust that God is still working, even if you can't see it yet. If you're in a season of waiting right now, hold on to this truth. What God has promised you is on its way, and no one can stop it. Don't let the apparent delay cause you to lose faith. Remember, God's timing is always perfect, and his plans are always for your good. Romans 8 verse 28 tells us, "And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose." Even when it feels like nothing is happening, God is working behind the scenes, aligning circumstances, and preparing you for the next season. Trust in his timing, because when the moment arrives, everything will fall into place exactly as he intended. Lesson number 3. Opposition doesn't mean defeat. One of the biggest misconceptions we have is believing that when we face opposition, it means we're doing something wrong or that God's plan isn't working out. But here's the truth. Opposition is not a sign of defeat. It's often a sign that you're exactly where you need to be. When you're walking in God's purpose, resistance is inevitable. Ephesians 6 verse 12 reminds us that our battle is not against people, but against spiritual forces. For our struggle is not against flesh and blood, but against the rulers, against the authorities. Against the powers of this dark world, and against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly realms. The enemy doesn't attack what isn't a threat, so when you face resistance, know that it's because God's plan for your life is moving forward, and the enemy wants to stop it. C.S. Lewis said it best, "There are far, far better things ahead than any we leave behind." This means that the opposition we face isn't just external. Sometimes the resistance comes from within. Our own doubts, fears, and uncertainties can become the biggest obstacles to stepping fully into God's plan. We hesitate because the unknown feels scary, or we question whether we're really capable of doing what God is calling us to do. But remember, if God has set a path before you, it's because he has already equipped you for it. The opposition, whether it's external circumstances or internal fears, cannot change the goodness of what God has in store for you. You have to push through that resistance, trusting that God's plan is still unfolding. When you encounter opposition, let it serve as confirmation that you're on the right track. The enemy wouldn't be fighting so hard to stop you if there wasn't something incredible on the other side of your struggle. The Bible is full of examples of people who faced tremendous opposition. Moses, David, Esther, Paul. But in each case, the resistance only propelled them closer to God's purpose for their lives. Don't let the presence of resistance make you doubt the promise. God's plan for you is still in motion, and no amount of opposition can derail it. Keep pressing forward, knowing that God's purpose is greater than any challenge you'll face along the way. Lesson number 4. Trust in the process and hold on to God's promises. What God has for you is unstoppable, but that doesn't mean the journey will be smooth or without difficulty. There will be moments when doubt creeps in, when waiting feels endless, and when it seems like nothing is going according to plan. In those times, it's easy to feel discouraged and question whether God's promises are really meant for you. But here's what you need to remember. God's promises never fail. Numbers 23 verse 19 says, "God is not human, that he should lie, not a human being, that he should change his mind. Does he speak and then not act? Does he promise and not fulfill?" No matter how tough the process may be, God's word stands firm. He will bring to pass everything he has spoken over your life. But trusting the process is crucial. C.S. Lewis wisely said, "You can't go back and change the beginning, but you can start where you are and change the ending." That means no matter what has happened in your past, whether you've experienced setbacks, made mistakes, or feel like you've wasted time, God's plan is still in motion. You may not be able to change how things began, but from this moment forward, you can choose to trust in God's promises and let Him guide your steps. His purpose for your life isn't canceled because of a delay or a detour. What He has ordained for you will still come to pass. The key is not to give up when the journey gets difficult. Hold on to the hope that what He has for you is still on the way, even if you can't see it right now. The journey of faith isn't about avoiding challenges, but learning to trust God through them. Even when it feels like nothing is happening, God is working behind the scenes in ways you can't yet see. Keep believing in His promises, because Isaiah 55 verse 11 assures us that His word will not return to me empty, but will accomplish what I desire and achieve the purpose for which I sent it. What God has promised you is unstoppable. Nothing can stand in the way of His plans. Not delays, not opposition, not even your own fears or doubts. So keep pressing forward, keep trusting, and keep holding on to God's promises. The breakthrough you're waiting for is coming, and when it arrives, you'll see how perfectly His plan has unfolded.